Hello everyone and welcome to today's story. Picture a land where sunlight pours down like a golden blanket and laughter floats through the air like a gentle song. This is the setting for our tale, a village so charming it could have been, lifted from an artist's canvas. Nestled in this beautiful place was a community led by King Chima, a ruler cherished by all. He wasn't just a king. He was a man of deep wisdom and boundless kindness. His care reached every corner of the village, making sure every person felt secure and content. King Chima's family was large and lively. He had 2 wives who brought him 5 children. His first wife, Ulie, blessed him with 3 daughters, princesses whose beauty rivaled the morning light. His second wife, Uchi, gave him 2 courageous sons, boys who would one day take up the mantle of leadership. This village was a place of simple joys and strong bonds, and at its heart stood the royal family. Let's step into their world and see what unfolds. The 3 princesses were unlike any you might imagine. They were full of energy, their spirits as bright as the sun that warmed their home. Every day, they'd kick off their shoes and race out of the palace, their bare feet pattering against the ground. Their laughter rang out clear and joyful as they chased each other through the village. They loved nothing more than playing, games and seeking out fun. Often they'd head to the river that wound through the land. There they'd splash water at one another, giggling as it soaked their clothes. Sometimes they'd tumble into the mud, their dresses turning from pristine to patchy with dirt, their hair becoming a wild tangle. But they didn't mind one bit. To them, this was happiness, unbound and real. They felt alive in those moments, free from any need to pretend. Yet not everyone saw it that way. Some villagers would watch them and shake their heads. "They're too unruly," they'd whisper among themselves. "Shouldn't princesses carry themselves with more grace? Why don't they act like royalty is supposed to?" These questions floated around, quiet but persistent. The princess's mother, Ulie, heard the murmurs and felt a pang of worry. She'd call her daughters to her side, sitting them down on woven mats in the palace. Her voice would be soft, but steady as she spoke. "My dear girls," she'd say, "you're princesses. It's time to show the dignity that comes with that title." She wanted them to understand their role, to see the expectations tied to their names. But the princesses? They'd listen for a moment, then burst into giggles and dart away, their spirits as untamed as the wind that rustled the village trees. They didn't want to be boxed in. They yearned to be part of the world around them, to play, to explore, to feel the land they'd one day help guide. The princesses paid little heed to the disapproval. To them, being true to themselves was far more valuable than wearing a crown or meeting other standards. Some in the village labeled them foolish. "Why can't they see they're not like us?" they'd mutter. "They're royal. They should act the part." But the girls held a different view. They believed that what mattered most was who they were inside, not the image people wanted them to project. Their mother might fret, and the villagers might talk, but the princesses kept on living their way. They ran through the fields, splashed in the streams, and laughed under the open sky. Their hearts were as free and vast as the village they called home. They dreamed of a future where they could care for this land, not as stiff figures on a throne, but as people who truly knew its pulse. And so, despite the whispers and worries, they danced through their days, guided by their own sense of joy. Now this village had a tradition, a festival held once a year, and it wasn't just any celebration. It was a special event where the princess's brothers, the 2 princes, would search for wives. When that day arrived, the village square came alive with excitement. Bright banners swayed in the breeze, their colors vivid against the blue sky. Music filled the air, a mix of drums and flutes that set feet tapping. The scent of freshly cooked food, Roasted yams, spiced meats, and sweet cakes drifted everywhere, tempting anyone who passed by. Young women arrived from every part of the village, and even from distant places. They wore their finest dresses, the fabrics shimmering as they moved. With graceful steps they danced, each one hoping to catch the eye of a prince and join the royal line. It was a sight to behold, a swirl of hope and beauty under the sun. Up in the palace, the three princesses stood by a tall window, looking down at the scene. Their minds, though, were elsewhere. They weren't drawn to the sparkle below. When April men approached them with offers of marriage, they'd brush them off with quick excuses. "He's too arrogant," one would say, crossing her arms. "He thinks his coins can buy my affection," another would sigh, shaking her head. Once a very rich man from another village came, his arms piled high with gifts, jewels, silks, and more. He boldly declared he'd marry all three to add to his 7 wives. The princesses didn't hesitate. They grabbed buckets of water and doused him, sending him off dripping and stunned. The village erupted in talk. How ridiculous, people said. Turning away such wealthy, important men, what are they thinking? The chatter spread like wildfire. But the princesses stood unmoved. King Chima and Queen Ulie were baffled by their daughter's choices. They'd sit with them under the palace roof, their faces lined with confusion. "Why won't you marry?" they'd ask. "Your brothers are ready to start their lives, and you're the older ones." The princesses would just smile, their eyes calm but firm. "We'll know when it's real love," they'd reply, their voices light yet certain. Below, the festival carried on in full swing. The young women danced and laughed, each trying to win a prince's favor. The princesses watched them with quiet respect. They admired the courage it took to step forward like that. But their own hearts pulled in a different direction. They didn't want a love decided in a single afternoon, picked from a crowd like a prize. They wanted something lasting, something that saw them beyond their titles. As the festival ended and the princes chose their brides, the village kept buzzing. What will happen to these 3 strange princesses? People wondered. Aloud, but the girls remained steady. They trusted that true love would find them in its own time, not forced by the rhythm of a festival drum. The years rolled on, and the seasons turned like pages in a book. The princesses grew into young women, their beauty deepening with each passing day. They'd stand together, watching the leaves shift from green to amber, their thoughts drifting to love, what it was, what it could be. Seeing their brothers settled with their new wives stirred something in them, the happiness. They saw there planted a small seed of wonder. Maybe, they thought, it was time to let love in. But it had to be real, the kind that looked past their royal names and saw the people they were inside. One evening, as stars began to dot the sky, they made their way to King Chima. They stood before him, their faces glowing with hope. "Father," they said, their voices blending in quiet strength, "we'd like our own festival, a place where men can show us what they're good at, their talents, their skills. We want love, but only if it's true." The king's eyebrows rose, surprise flickering across his face. This wasn't part of the village's ways. Festivals for princes to find brides? Yes. But for princesses to set their own terms? That was new. Still, he looked into their eyes and saw how earnest they were. These daughters of his had always been different, their spirits wild and free in a way he couldn't tame. He paused, then gave a slow nod. "Very well," he said, his voice warm with trust. "Let there be a festival." The news hit the village like a spark on dry grass. Excitement flared up everywhere, from the mud huts to the market stalls. The princesses had set something in motion, and no one could wait to see what came next. The announcement traveled fast. carried by eager voices to every edge of the village and beyond its borders. Men, young and old, near and far, began to prepare. They saw a chance to win the princess's favor, and they weren't about to let it slip by. Some practiced their crafts, carving wood or weaving baskets with careful hands. Others sharpened their talents, strumming tunes or reciting poems under the trees. They dreamed of standing before the princesses, of earning a place beside them. The village itself buzzed with life. Tailors sat at their looms, stitching fine clothes in every shade of the rainbow. Cooks stirred pots over open fires, the smells of stew and bread rising into the air. Musicians plucked at strings and tapped on drums, tuning their sounds for the big day. This festival promised to be something special, unlike anything the village had seen before. The princesses watched it all unfold from the palace, their eyes tracing the changes below. They saw the determination in the suitors' faces, the delight in the villagers' steps. They couldn't predict what would happen, but a flutter of anticipation grew inside them. Maybe, they thought, among these men, be they jokers with quick wit, poets with soft words, or warriors with steady hands, they'd find someone who truly saw them, someone who'd look past the crowns they wore and into the hearts they carried. The idea sent a quiet thrill through them, a hope they hadn't felt before. The festival day broke with a clear, shining sky, the sun beaming down like a proud witness. The village square transformed into a living, breathing spectacle. It hummed with energy, like a beehive ready to burst. Men arrived from every direction, some from the village, others from lands far off. They came dressed in their best, their clothes crisp and bright, their smiles stretching wide. In their hands they carried offerings, baskets of gold, promises of vast fields, or displays of their own strength and charm. Each one hoped to stand out, to catch a princess's gaze and win her heart. The air was thick with effort, every suitor vying to prove himself the best. The princesses stood together, watching it all quietly. Their eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and curiosity. They saw the men compete, each trying to top the one before. But deep down, they knew these things. Riches, power, looks weren't what they were after. They wanted something more, something that went beyond what could be shown or held. As the sun began to sink, casting a warm golden light across the village, the princesses stepped into the center of the square. The crowd hushed, waiting. "We have a challenge," they said, their voices clear and bold. "To win our hearts, you can't just offer wealth or strength. You have to guess our true names." A ripple of silence spread, then broke into soft murmurs. Names? The suitors blinked, caught off guard. Everyone knew them as the three foolish princesses. Their real names were a mystery, locked away from common knowledge. The men stood still, their minds racing. Guess their names. They'd come armed with gifts and boasts, not ready for a puzzle like this. The crowd stirred, a mix of confusion and interest bubbling up. "How could they know the princesses' names?" someone whispered. "It's impossible," another added. But the sisters didn't waver. Their challenge hung in the air, sharp and unshakable. This wasn't about what the suitors could bring or lift. It was about what they could see, how well they could understand. The princesses wanted someone who'd dig deeper, who'd care enough to learn who they really were. Questions bounced around the village. "Is it a trick? A test?" The suitors glanced at each other, their earlier confidence fading. The princesses watched, small smiles tugging at their lips. They'd shifted the game, asking for effort over flash. As the festival drew to a close, the men drifted away, their thoughts buzzing like bees. They'd arrived to impress, only to leave with a task they hadn't expected. The princesses had shown their sharpness, making it clear they sought a love that went beyond the surface, a love that knew them, not just their titles. The village hummed with talk of the challenge, wondering who, if anyone, could meet it. It was a moment that would linger, a story already taking root in the minds of those who'd seen it unfold. Amid all the guessing and whispers, there was a man in the village named Okon. Most knew him as the local oddity, the one who stumbled through the streets, a bottle often in hand, his words slurred with drink. People saw him and shrugged. Just the village drunk, they'd say, dismissing him as unimportant. But Okon wasn't as simple as they thought. Beneath his rough edges there was a spark, a quiet depth few noticed. When word of the princess's challenge reached him, something shifted inside. He sat up straighter, his foggy mind clearing for a moment. Why not me, he wondered. Why can't I be the one to win them over? It was a wild thought, but it took hold. With a determination that surprised even himself, Okon decided to try. He set out to uncover the truth, the real names of the three princesses. He started by watching them, keeping his distance. He'd linger near the trees or sit by the riverbank, a shadow no one paid mind to. He saw their joy, the way they laughed and played, their spirits soaring like birds in the sky. But their names? Those stayed hidden. They called each other by little nicknames, a secret language of smiles and quick glances. Okon listened hard, but the answer didn't come. Still, he didn't give up. Day after day, he followed their trails, not too close, just enough to learn. He wanted to understand them, to see what others missed. Then one afternoon, chance stepped in. The princesses were wandering near the forest, their steps light with play. The youngest, caught up in her fun, didn't spot a dip in the ground, a paustaiti, hidden pit covered by leaves. With a sudden gasp, she slipped and fell, her laughter turning to a sharp cry. "Help!" she called, her voice ringing through the trees. "Someone, please!" Okon, tucked behind a bush, froze. His heart thumped. This was his moment, not just to win a prize, but to do something good. He started to move, but before he could, the eldest sister's voice cut through. "Imma's here to save you," she shouted. The middle one chimed in. "Leela's coming too." Okon's eyes widened. Names, real, true names, spilled out like rare coins. He watched as Imma and Leela hurried over, grabbing a long stick from the ground. "Hold on, Tina," they called to their sister, their tones full of care. Together they stretched the stick down, guiding Tina to grab it. With a pull and a tug, they hauled her up, her muddy hands clutching theirs. The three collapsed into a heap, arms around each other, laughing through their relief. Okon, still hidden, felt a warmth spread through him. He'd found their names, Imma, Leela, Tina. But more than that, he'd seen their love, a bond that shone brighter than any challenge. It wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about what he'd witnessed. Okon took a deep breath, his pulse racing like a drum. He stepped out from the shadows, his voice rising above the village noise. "I know their names," he yelled, the words carrying far. "Imma, Leela, Tina!" The village stopped. Heads turned, eyes widened. Okon, the man they'd brushed, off as a fool, had done it. He'd solved the riddle no one else could touch. People stared, mouths open, as the truth sank in. The princesses looked at him, their faces lighting up. This wasn't just a victory for Okon. For them, it was proof. Someone had seen them, really seen them. Word raced through the streets, from the river to the huts. Okon, once a nobody, was now the name on every tongue. His quiet patience had paid off, revealing the secret in a way no grand show could. It was a tale already growing wings, one that would be told again and again. The village gathered in the square, the air thick with wonder. Okon stood before King Chima, the princesses at his side. Every eye was on him, every whisper about him. "I know your daughters' names," he said, his voice steady and proud. "Imma, Leela, Tina." The crowd murmured, impressed, but Okon wasn't done. He straightened up, his gaze firm. "And I'm not who you think," he said. "I'm Prince Okon from a land nearby. I came here not as a drunk, but in disguise, to learn the true hearts of your daughters." A gasp swept through the people. The man they'd laughed at was a prince, clever and thoughtful, seeing past the game to the core beneath. The princesses smiled at him, their eyes warm with admiration and something more. They'd met countless suitors, men with riches, men with might, but none had tried to know them like Okon had. He'd watched, he'd listened, he'd cared. King Chima stepped forward, his face soft with emotion. He saw the joy in his daughters, the wisdom in Okon. "You've proven yourself," he said, "worthy of my girls." The weddings that followed were a marvel, days of music, dance, and laughter that filled the village to its brim. Imma, Leela, and Tina stood with Prince Okon, their hearts woven together in trust and respect. It was a union built on something real, something lasting. As the princesses and Prince Okon set off to begin their new chapter, the village paused to reflect. They'd misjudged them all, calling the sisters foolish, dismissing Okon as nothing. But this story showed them otherwise. Love, they learned, wasn't about titles or what you could see on the outside. It was about understanding, about seeing someone's true worth. The tale of the three princesses and their prince became a legend passed down through the years. It was a reminder. Real nobility comes from the heart, from the courage to look deeper. The village had been changed by it, their eyes opened to a truth they'd missed before. And so, as the sun set over the land, painting it in hues of gold, the village carried on, touched by this story. The princesses and Prince Okon stepped in too, their future, their path bright with promise. They left behind a lesson that lingered, a call to see beyond the surface, to value what's real. I hope you enjoyed this journey. If you did, please hit that like button, share it with your friends and family, and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for more stories like this one. Until next time, take care and goodbye.